how a hybrid store format will transform retail. To discuss it, I'm joined by two experts from CBRE. John Morris is Retail and Industrial and Logistics Leader. Hello, John.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
And Melina Cordero is Managing Director for Retail Capital Markets. Hello, Melina.
Oh.
So, Melina, let me start with you. There's a new CBRE report on the hybrid store format. What does it tell us about exactly how this format will work?
Sure. Well, let me step back a little minute, and talk about why we even need to talk about this theme and this topic of hybrid retail, right? Because we know as consumers and as, retail sector experts and people that e-commerce has been growing tremendously. And what we have learned over the years and what retailers have learned over the years is that the solution for dealing with and delivering e-commerce is calling omni-channel. And because of the costs of delivering, the costs and the operations involved in getting things to us, that we really need to look at how we leverage existing real estate in the store to deliver on this profitably and efficiently. So that is where the retailer focus has been, I'd say, for the past 5 years or so, is really on how do we make logistics and supply chain work to get goods to people at profit. And so this is where the store comes in, where retailers have been really focusing on the last few years. How do we leverage the store? How do we reformat the store? What do we need to do to and with the store to deliver on e-commerce efficiently? And so what we're talking about in this hybrid report is, what does the future of the store look like, taking into account all of these omni-channel changes that are happening? And so what we believe we will see in the hybrid store of the future is this real blending of e-commerce and physical retail, where the store is serving a sort of dual blended purpose of fulfillment and customer service, customer facing, right? And what that looks like for every retailer is going to be unique. So it's not a one size fits all. There are elements that will be common across all of them, but it really comes down to location specific, brand specific needs in what that store will look like.
John, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And just add a little bit to Melina's great answer. I think this is about leverage for retailers. So in an environment where so much more of retail is purchased online, and where retailers generally have a good, viable, high customer experience level brick and mortar infrastructure, it's leveraging that infrastructure for things like ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, even returns. And data suggests that the return experience in the store is more valued by customers than the return experience online. It's also more expensive online. It also so happens that about 3 times as many goods purchased online get returned as those bought brick and mortar. So the brick and mortar infrastructure as an extended part of the retail experience and the supply chain is a great leverage opportunity that pure online retail doesn't have at this point.
Well, it sounds great in theory, but as you know, these are two very distinctly different types of order fulfillment. So how would these single locations handle inventory, both for in-store shopping and for e-commerce? They're being handled in different ways. How do you do that all in the same space?
So generally speaking, for most goods, blending the inventory or sharing the inventory, picking from the same place is going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Most online orders and most store orders are bought one at a time, what's called eaches. And inventory is often stored consolidated in pallets, cases, boxes, layers, etc. This kind of inventory is stored in eaches, so it's actually easier to manage the inventory as compared to in a warehouse where much of the inventory is consolidated, and to pick them one at a time does require inventory to be in more than one place. Mm-hmm. So for the store, this is actually not a tremendous challenge. You'll see more of the inventory in the back room, where the labor designated to doing that picking or acquiring the inventory for the order can be dedicated to that activity. But otherwise, the inventory management piece is, I could argue, even easier than it is in a
Interesting.
warehouse.
Melina, you see that as well?
Yeah, and John really is our expert on supply chain and logistics here, but we talk about this a lot, John. It comes down to data and technology too in a lot of ways, right? Inventory systems that retailers have in place, that's another focus area that they've had for years, because being able to know where things are when, and also predict where things should be to be able to be in the right place at the right time. So critical for retailers. So the data and technology portion of inventory management is really, really important.
When we first started hearing about the omni-channel and the use of a single store for multiple purposes, the model that was being proposed at the time was that you would have store associates fulfilling e-commerce orders from the actual store shelves. They'd be standing right next to an in-store shopper, maybe even competing for that item on the shelf. One of them would be taking it to the cash register. The other would be taking it for shipping to someone's door. Now we're hearing that that might not be the right way to go, that you might need to have a separate kind of fulfillment center, maybe a mini micro fulfillment center on, where that inventory is kept separate. Which model makes more sense to you guys?
So Melina, quickly, I think it's the latter, and would love your perspective. Because it's a chance to specialize within the one building, right? And so the customer facing skills, the interaction, the experience really should be different between those two types of processes. And the idea that we would have people picking inventory in the way of a customer trying to shop would be suboptimal. I think it's going to happen sometimes for sure if a piece in the back is out of stock or size or color. But I think the latter, which is the specialization, is probably more preferred, more ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what we've seen over the past few years is that retailers are finding that customer service levels or feedback on customer service has gone down, right? Because consumers are feeling like, the store associates that used to be there to help me pick something out or find something are now busy, packing boxes. And so that's had an impact on customer service. And so I agree with John that there's a sort of specialization that needs to happen. I think depending on the store size, it might be a micro fulfillment center as a solution. With the bigger boxes, I think some solutions we're seeing are that hybrid concept where maybe a portion of the box is dedicated to back of house, and that's a totally separate, almost separate workforce than that which is at the front of house. So that's another model that we're seeing.
Now, with all this talk about exciting e-commerce, it almost seems like at some point the retail store in our discussions have become the retail experience for the shopper in store has become almost an afterthought. But I think you guys are suggesting that's not the case here in a hybrid store format, that there is a lot of attention going to be paid to the front of the house, so to speak. What will that look like? What will be some of the special features that will be employed in order to bring actual people into the store?
Yeah, this is a big one. And I think going back to one of my first comments, this is the beauty of it is it's going to be unique to each brand. And so I think, if going to the store 10 years ago or 15 years ago now was really about being able to find what you need, browse, do all that, the browsing we can do online, and actually the aisle is much larger online, right? It's called the endless aisle. So we have to think about what we go to the store for. And I think increasingly people go to the store for the experience, in some cases for convenience. But I say all that because I think that going forward for a lot of brands, that front of house is going to be about the experience, which we've been talking about for years. But there are a couple of things we'll definitely see, right? I think we're going to see a lot more technology. We're not going to go to the store to browse as much. We may do the browsing on digital platforms within the store, but it's less about what's on the store shelves and more about what's the experience or the brand experience or, the experience I get to have. And I think technology is going to play a really big role as well. So for one, I think, and I've been saying this for a few years now, I think that we won't have checkout lines within the next 7 years. I think that the checkout line is going to disappear. Things will be automated, sensors. We won't be standing in line. So that removes a whole portion of the front of house. If you think about any retailer you go into, it removes a portion of the time you spend in the store, and it removes a big portion of the footprint. So there are a lot of changes I think we'll see, but the focus overall is going to be on how do I interact with this brand and what's the takeaway I have from it.
Yeah. What do you think, John? We're hearing about things like high-tech fitting rooms. We're hearing about hospitality lounges, all kinds of like bells and whistles to make the store a super attractive place to come to. Do you see that happening as a reality?
Yeah, I do. And I think you're seeing things like that being tried out by, Capital One and other kinds of brands. Melina pointed out early, it's certainly custom for each retailer. Bob, there's a whole science around where retail should be, who buys, what's the segmentation, the demographics, psychographics, et cetera. I think for every retailer, that's a really unique kind of science, where they should be, how big it would be, what the revenue expectations are from that store. What's happening now is that there's I'll call it a logistics science being added to that custom decision making for every retailer. So not only where does retail want to be for that brand, but where does delivery want to be for that brand? And so where these retailers go, how big, what the experience is, and how much inventory is there for shipping, I think it's going to be a really unique process driven by the data that says, where's my best retail location and where's my best logistics location, and when do they converge?
Melina, you mentioned the elimination of checkout lines. Well, we've already started to see automated checkout in a lot of stores, but maybe the next step is what Amazon has already pioneered in their small store spaces, and that is when you take something off the shelf, at that point, you've already bought it. You can walk out of the store. You don't even need to go through any so-called automated checkout. This leads me to the question about whether if I'm going to be walking into one of these hybrid stores in the future, am I going to see any people at all? Will there be store associates there to serve me, or will there be a robot that tells me where to go if I want to know where a particular product is? What will that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly we all have these fears of like the robotization of retail.
Yeah.
And certainly we have seen some concepts, I mean, some far-fetched but interesting concepts that are, you don't interact with a single human throughout the whole thing. You order from a robot, they make the drink, the works. I don't think that's going to be the dominant model moving forward. Look, we as humans like other humans, and so that's a basic thing. But I think what we're going to see is that the humans, the people working in the stores, their function changes and their role changes, and so they go more from what they're doing now, which is this hybrid. Okay, I'm customer facing, but I'm also doing fulfillment and operations, to much more of that separation, and that the labor force in the store on the customer facing side gets to focus on the customer service. And I think we think about labor in conjunction with the technology. So there is technology today that would allow a store associate to have a lot of information on us before we even come up to them. So for example, if we have downloaded a store's app, the store associate may be walking around with an iPad that says, oh, Melina's just walked in. This is her size. These are the last 10 items that she bought at the store. So based on that, there's an algorithm that tells me what her style is. So these are the items that you should maybe suggest to her. So that is an example of how technology and automation is actually complementing the store associate's role here, and actually makes it a better experience for the consumer. So that's what I see moving forward.
John, do you have a final word for us on this? Is this indeed the thing of the future in retailing?
Yeah, I'm sure significantly it is. And by the way, Melina, that sounds a little Orwellian.
I was going to say whether that's something that you want.
It sounds helpful, maybe, but certainly a little Orwellian. Yes, Bob, I think it is going to be, and it's very much, and again, not for every retailer, not in every city, but where the rent differences between retail space and industrial space are not as big, and where there is some density of population and of congestion, and where proximity to customer can benefit from retail having inventory, I certainly think you're going to see more and more ship from store. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past. We are sure that stores on average are going to actually hold more inventory to do these kinds of customer value add activities. Not that every store will, but on average, stores are going to hold more inventory because that's their benefit as part of the experience, is the availability, the convenience to fill orders in the moment or ship from store. So I'm sure that as part of omni-channel transformation in the next 3 to 5 years, this concept is part of the solution for many, especially in higher income, more congested, high demand markets where real estate is more expensive.
So much more to be talked about in this story of the transformation of retail and innovations in retail spaces. But I want to thank both of you, John Morris, Melina Cordero of CBRE, for joining me today to talk about some of these exciting developments, and hope we can talk again at another point to get into even more detail. But for now, thanks both of you. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Bob.